A valid intellectual argument is a rigid, load-bearing structure where premises perfectly connect to conclusions. When that connection shifts even slightly, the framework fractures. In his book, Attacking Faulty Reasoning, philosopher T. Edward Dahmer provides the framework for a forensic analysis of these structural failures. Central to this analysis is the acceptability criterion. It is the fundamental rule that for any conclusion to be warranted, the premises supporting it must be uniform and acceptable to a reasonable person. While we often look for outright lies, this criterion is frequently violated through covert linguistic confusion. Highly persuasive arguments may remain factually accurate, while their structural linguistics collapse, rendering the entire chain of logic invalid. This specific failure is known as the equivocation fallacy, the act of directing an audience toward an unwarranted conclusion by employing a single key phrase in two different senses. It functions through camouflage. The word retains the exact same appearance, which hides the underlying shift in meaning. This semantic shift is harder to detect than an explicit falsehood because it bypasses our usual critical filters. When the brain sees the same word repeated, it instinctively assumes the logical continuity remains unbroken. Equivocation is a structural failure masquerading as a bridge. It is designed to bypass rational defenses and force a conclusion that the premises do not actually support. To audit these claims, we can translate colloquial language into standard form, stripping the argument down to its core components. Consider the claim that gambling should be legalized because people gamble every time they get in their cars or decide to get married. In standard form, we isolate the first instance of the key term. Here, the word refers to taking everyday, unavoidable life risks. We'll mark this as variable x1. Now we examine the conclusion, isolating the second instance of the term. In this context, the definition has shifted to participating in regulated games of chance. This is variable x2. Because x1 does not equal x2, the transitive property of the argument is broken. The connection between the premise and the conclusion snaps. Despite sounding like a practical observation, the premises offer no support for the conclusion. The logical bridge is a semantic illusion. We see the same pattern in high-stakes abstract debates, such as the claim that science is no different from religion because scientists have absolute faith in their method. We isolate the first use of faith regarding religious belief and assign it as variable y1. In this context, the word describes a belief system that accepts an absolute truth based on authority, often in the absence of physical evidence. We extract the second use of faith used in the context of science and assign it as variable y2. This second definition describes trust in a rigorous method that produces beliefs constantly corrected by testable evidence. Comparing these variables reveals that they represent fundamentally opposed approaches to knowledge. The arguer conflates these definitions to drag a rigorous methodology down to an unprovable baseline. This linguistic trickery weaponizes the word faith against itself, attempting to equate two diametrically opposed systems of thought. This lack of uniformity can even lead to self-sabotage, such as when a student refuses to take a logic class because it teaches you how to argue, and people argue too much as it is. To test the uniformity of the argument, we extract the term argue. The academic context refers to the constructive process of supporting claims with sound reasoning. This is variable z1. The second use refers to destructive controversy or disagreeable haranguing. This is variable z2. The arguer projects the negative traits of destructive haranguing onto the setting of constructive reasoning. This shift directs the listener toward the unwarranted conclusion that studying formal logic somehow induces social hostility. When we fail to enforce strict uniformity in our terms, we risk rejecting valuable tools for clarity based on phantom concepts created by bad semantics. Neutralizing this error in real time requires stripping away the linguistic camouflage. This begins by halting the discussion to pinpoint the suspect word. Once identified, the arguer must provide a precise definition for the word in each separate context where it appears. Clarifying these definitions often exposes the gap in the logical chain immediately. If the arguer resists, we can force the comparison by substituting the first definition into the second part of the argument. Replacing the original word with its explicit definition makes the premise visibly and audibly nonsensical. This process forces the arguer's broken logic out of the shadows, revealing that the premises no longer connect to the conclusion. When substitution isn't enough to expose the flaw, the absurd counterexample method provides a definitive proof of structural failure. By capturing the exact structural mapping of the flawed argument and applying it to a parallel topic, we can produce an undeniably absurd result. Consider this classic example. Premise 1. Since only man is rational, we define the first variable as human. Premise 2. And no woman is a man, we define the second variable as male. Following the same structural logic, we reach the conclusion, therefore, no woman is rational. The structural failure is now impossible to ignore. Enforcing strict term uniformity protects the acceptability criterion. It ensures our search for truth stays on track, rather than following the shifting illusions of language.